Alex Mann. What other ways could Putin have checked NATO expansion without resorting to war in Ukraine? Yes, there were a dozen routes he could have taken. First off, Putin could have done nothing. Zelensky's approval rating was below 30%, and the government's approval rating was in the teens. A friendly government may have been elected at some point. Ignoring that, here's the reality of the situation with NATO. Putin has nuclear weapons. Even if he had just a dozen of them, it would be enough to deter any acts of aggression towards Russia. In other words, Russian borders are secure so long as the nation remains stable. NATO isn't some hyper-aggressive alliance out to conquer the world. I cannot see the US ever starting WW3 for no reason. Even after aggressive Russian actions in Eastern Europe, the US refuses to intervene. Most nations are joining NATO due to Russian aggression. When small nations fear abuse from a vastly more powerful nation, they seek strong allies. This is why NATO exists. If Russia didn't take a hostile posture, there may not be a need for NATO. Above all, though, there is one unavoidable fact: there is nothing Putin can do to check NATO. Russia spends $70 billion a year on its military, the US spends 10 times more. Additionally, Russia wastes lots of money on vanity projects like Gen 3 fighters and modern tanks. These are great on paper, but Russia cannot afford to produce many of them, so it won't change their tactical realities. Russia spends lots of money on internal security, which means military forces aimed at subduing hostile populations, including Russians. Russia spends a large percentage of its budget on maintaining 6,000 nuclear warheads. Again, having 100 would be way more than enough, yet Russia spends tens of billions trying to keep 6,000 maintained. This means of the $70 billion they spend, a lot of this spending doesn't help much. So Russia relies on conscripts, doesn't do proper maintenance, relies on outdated equipment, has terrible SCAD capabilities, and spends poorly on logistics. The US military and NATO are so drastically more powerful than Russia, there is nothing Russia can do to really resist NATO if it ever came to war. If the US and NATO invaded Russia, Russia would lose, period. In fact, they would lose rather badly. It would be bloody and costly, but Russia would not stand much of a chance. The Russian playbook for survival is simple. Have WMDs as a deterrent from Western aggression. Seek positive economic relationships with Eastern Europe and Asia. Focus on a strong economy. Russia has the raw resources and population to become a massive economic power. This is the best way to compete with the US. Focus on internal stability via economic strength and popular governance. Do these things and Russia will be safe. More Russia will become a dominant world power with a happy, prospering population. 31.3K views. View 1041 upvotes.